I'm David Tordoff, and I'm with my wife. We're representing the University of the Third Age, U3A. I'm very interested that each of the speakers comes up with a phrase such as lifelong learning, learning for all ages, participate in learning throughout their lives. In my experience to date, I still do a lot of learning. I'm in my 76th year and I expect to be learning for at least the next 20. You've got to realise that the population from, say, 60 plus, more than a third of the population, possibly of Wolverhampton, is of that age. And our experience has been that we have had to go out and find learning. Learning is not offered to us. And that is a very difficult thing for people to do. You've been a working person, and it's been, things that you've worked that way. But I'd just like to ask the other people, is their experience of, to me, learning, physical and mental health is what it provides. It provides social inclusion. A large number of our people in the U3A are single persons, and this gives them inclusivity. Grandparenting was mentioned. Yeah, it isn't only parents in this day and age who assist children to learn. Grandparents are becoming far and far more important to that. We've got 4 grandsons. Because of their working commitments, I think we input sometimes more than our sons and daughters-in-law do to those children. But we need to learn and continue to learn to provide that resource to them. And then the final thing I'll mention is a thing that I also am a Dementia Friends champion, and dementia. Continued learning is one of the best things people can do to hold back this awful thing we have of dementia. And that should be encouraged more and more. So what I'm asking really is, you've mentioned it in your talks, how much do you actually do in your specific initiatives with UNESCO or wherever, which actually focuses specifically on the 60 plus, 70s, 80s, 90s?
Thanks. I think that's really good question and a relevant question. We've, over the years, through our community-based education programs, looked on people of that age as teachers and learners. And we have a range of programs where the skills, the knowledge, experience that is there in communities is shared not just with the same age, with their peers, but also with from an intergenerational point of view. I'm a big fan of the University of the Third Age. I think well done. It's something we need to do more of in Cork. One of the initiatives I'd like to talk a little bit about, maybe Willie would add his own local perspectives to this, is around craft. There was a tradition of craft in Cork, of sewing and of crochet, and that's proved to be a fantastic means of bringing people together, involving people. I absolutely agree with you. The health benefits, the dementia-friendly benefits from being involved in learning, we're only beginning to understand them now. So that EcoWell approach brings those two things together. Willie, do you want to talk about the craft initiative in Ballyfahan?
Yeah. I just think of one person, Nancy Falvey is her name. She's in her 80s now at this stage and incredibly active. But she ran what you'd call an old-fashioned knitting class, crochet, that kind of thing. To be blunt, a group of old ladies knitting away, happy days. But until they were working within a community development centre, and they decided they, through links, began to make moves and work with a primary school, small kids. And they went in, taught those kids knitting and crocheting, and you had a link straight away. You had the old learning from the young. But it went further than that, because they made other moves, and they were working with post-primary students, and they were different to work with. But the links they made there were incredible. They went further than that, and I was in a college of further education in the community. They came into us. They began to link up with textile teachers, creative textiles, and they went and got qualifications themselves, this group. And they saw a whole new world opening up for themselves. And then they put on an exhibition of craft from primary school kids right up to their own age. And everybody was learning from each other. And it was one of the best things I've ever been involved in, and they put this exhibition on in the art gallery in the city, you know.
Really, that's a great example. I wonder if Judith or Tommy would like to come in on that. Thank you.
I have edited a book with Raul Valdez-Cotera from UNESCO called Entrepreneurial Learning City Regions, and one of the chapters is written by the lead of the University of the Third Age in Swansea, which is very, very active. And I agree with you about the inclusion, particularly about people who are single in older age. It's really important that they get out and that they learn. One of the challenges we have is that our University of Third Age is generally run by volunteers who already have an education. And they tend to attract people who also have already had an education, and they find it quite difficult to work in disadvantaged communities. But we do have an active Department of Adult Continuing Education in the university, which works in community centres in disadvantaged communities right across the region, and actually delivers a part-time degree in the community. But they also run all kinds of classes. The local authority has been very challenged, and I don't know if this is the same in England, but the funding for what we used to call lifelong learning, but it meant adult education, has been really severely cut, and people are expected to pay for it. And the money has been diverted into skills development, which I can understand from the point of view of needing to develop the economy. But as you say, we have a growing population of people who need these opportunities to go on. And I think that obviously there's somebody very important in this audience, the work of organisations like NIACE as addressing the policy and saying how important it is that there is more funding put in to adult education is really, really important. And everybody here and all the learning cities should be saying that quite clearly to the policymakers.
Great, thank you. Tommy, final comment?
Yeah, so in Bristol we've got quite a strong kind of partnership around older people services. So for example, there's a partnership called Bristol Ageing Better, who brought about £8 million worth of National Lottery funding into the city to improve ageing services in the services for the ageing population in the city, and working with them they developed a grant strand around lifelong learning opportunities, and they called it Learning for Life for everyone, and they distributed that funding to organisations who wanted to run learning opportunities for older people. We also, you may have seen a documentary about our children's centres worked with one of our older people's homes in the city and put a children's nursery into an older person's home for that intergenerational activity, and it went down really well. Both the parents of the young people and the older people and the children said it was a fantastic experience for them. It's something, again, we would like to look at running, and I think it's something nationally that could really take off. But again, there's funding issues around that. But you know, the feedback from that, and if anyone who hasn't seen that, if you can watch it on catch up, it was a really interesting
Okay,
program.
great, thanks. That's some great examples there. I think we've got a question from Alan and then one at the back.
Hello, I'm Alan Tuckett. I work at Wolverhampton sometimes. I wanted to look at an issue that Tommy, you ought to look at. Tommy raised an issue about change of leadership. 20 years ago there was quite a strong learning city movement in England, and it disappeared when political change happened. One political leader moved and the next person, it wasn't their baby. How do you deal with managing upwards, as it were, all those sources who need to be kept on board?
Just before anybody answers that, let's take another question at the back, and then we'll come back to the panel. Right up at the back. And is there anybody else wanted? Got one there as well. She's making her way up.
Sorry, yeah. Philip Dearden from the university. We're really interested to hear that Judith mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm really interested that Dennis mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. And my question really is around, you picked on individual goals, but is the whole 17 goal framework a useful framework to reference, A, in the bid when you put a bid in, but B, to actually sort of badge what you're doing. You've picked on individual goals, and I'm intrigued as to why you haven't taken them all.
Okay, and then we've got a question right up at the back, I think. We will come back to you. I know you're ready to go with those answers.
Hi, my name is Maureen Khan from TLC College. We're a community-based learning provider in Wolverhampton. The question that I have is, we've been doing activities in the community for 20 years, and I find that the informal learning and lifelong learning has a challenge with regards to the bureaucracy and the paperwork that takes place against the actual learning outcomes. Has that changed for you guys?
Okay, and then just one final one from Josh in the middle there, and then we'll move to the panel.
You write them down, Dennis.
I'm Josh Johnson, and I haven't got a hat on, but I wear many hats, so I don't know which one I'm wearing today. But the question is, we talk about lifelong learning and sustainability, and the engaging young people in from primary age, which for me, I'm very passionate about that, especially here in Wolverhampton. Again, we can see in Wolverhampton too that young people, the obesity of young people at the moment, and I've heard that, lifelong learning, yes, but what does the healthy side of it to take them out of this kind of situation? Have you come across that in your areas? Because I know in Wolverhampton we closed lots of our youth clubs in the community itself. So that takes out a few of the activities and things like what young people do within those area of poverty.
Okay, that's great, thank you. So, brief comments from panellists on some of those varying issues.
Try and remember some of those questions. So, Sir Alan, just to answer yours first of all. For us, as I say, we've had a lot of change. I think we were very lucky in our political change that our mayor, who was elected in 2016, was bought into learning city concept very much from the very beginning. Came in with his own ideas, obviously, very much around inclusion and disadvantage and areas of deprivation, making those social changes within the city. So it wasn't that difficult in that respect. I think what's been slightly more difficult is our senior leadership, specifically in the local authority, have come in from outside of the city. So there's no that kind of succession planning and getting everyone on board. It was more difficult, and it's taken time, and it's taken showing them the benefit of what working in partnership can bring in additionality to the city. So hopefully that's answered some of that. It has been.
I don't feel you have to answer all the questions.
Well, no, I won't. I'll
pass on to others. Yeah,
well, I just want to mention something on the gentleman who asked the last question. So you mentioned around health and well-being. I think I talked about the One City plan and the aim until 2050, and it's been quite interesting bringing those different partnerships, the Health and Wellbeing Partnership, the Homes Board, the Community Safety Board together, because it's almost like which one, because you could say health runs through everything, or learning runs through everything, or without good housing, secure, stable housing, you can't have one or the other. So I think that has really, and Dennis, you alluded to about bringing all those different partners, and it's sometimes difficult to bring them all into a Learning City partnership because you would have hundreds of people in the Learning City Partnership Board, and it's too many. But in that wider kind of One City plan context, it's really given us that ability to bring those in, and health is a real key driver for our mayor as well, coming from a public health background.
Okay, thanks for that. Did anybody else want to come? Judith, did you want to come in?
I think I want to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, because they're all interconnected. So although obviously we start with education because we're talking about learning, you have to think about all the different goals. But with everything that's complicated, you have to try and find a way in for people. So if you focus on one area and then you explain how they're interconnected, then you gradually bring in all the goals. It depends, of course, on how much previous experience the learners have. So you have to take into account a lot of people already have thought about all the Sustainable Development Goals and have background knowledge of it. In terms of changing leaders, We've got a real challenge with that in Swansea. We don't have an elected mayor, we have a leader of the council. At the moment, there's a huge focus on our city deal and on what that's going to do to our economy. And for me, if I had badged the Learning City around lifelong learning, which had gone out of favour as a term and as a concept, I think it would have fallen flat on its face at the beginning. So you have to think about how you're positioning what you're doing as a learning city to meet the varying goals of the different people who are in power across your city. So my own Vice-Chancellor is very interested in engineering and STEM subjects, so we talk about skills and how this will help with skills development. The leader of the other university in the city is much more community focused, so you just have to slightly change your message for each, but try and find something that will appeal to all, really.
Final comments on Cork?
Just a couple of quick answers. Alan's question around change of leadership. We found it very useful to have an informal think tank group who aren't belong to the top and are feeding directly from the bottom. So there's a ground up and a top down. And that MOU idea, Memorandum of Understanding, is the wording is very simple. We got a successful signing done with San Francisco, who the US hasn't, and they're pulling out of UNESCO even, so their struggles are different. But San Francisco as a city is committing to working with Cork City to develop their learning practices. So I'm sure you're aware of a couple of tactics that work along the way. Hanging it on one mayor's hat is going to be always a problem. So we've brought every mayor in. Every festival, the new mayor in is the patron of the festival, and that brings it into council. So, as long as all the councillors feel it's theirs, and success has many fathers, mothers, brothers and sisters as well. Yeah. I'd like to just briefly answer the question on paperwork and the recording of outcomes. That increasingly is a negative. And when people come in to be involved, particularly as adults, who may not have had a good experience of education, and the first thing you look for is their social security number and what they've had for breakfast and how many medical conditions they have. That's a big problem. Very interestingly, we brought the learning neighbourhoods idea to Limerick City. And parts of Limerick City have suffered huge issues with criminality, drug gangs, etc. And we were in the heart of one of those communities. And the very fact that the learning neighbourhoods didn't need to count how many learners were involved gave the room energy, and they're looking to do something along those lines, which brings back the heart of what community-based education and adult learning used to be about. When there's more of an emphasis on skills, some of that kills off some of the motivation. And look, we've always found if learning can be felt to be fun, enjoyable, and at the heart of living, then the motivation gets over a lot of the other barriers. So I think we've covered all that.
That's great, thank you very much. I'm really conscious that the discussions and the presentations this morning have generated a lot of thought, a lot of reflection, a lot of questions, but I've got Mary behind me and I can feel her telling me that time is running out. So I think there will be an opportunity for you to catch up with our speakers when we finish the formal proceedings, maybe if you're able to stay around and have some of those conversations. Some really diverse and rich perspectives on how learning cities work, I think that for me are going to help us a lot going forward to think about how we might want to shape this for our particular area. So before I hand over to Mary to close, can you just all join me in thanking our speakers?
Thank you very much. Next steps. This is very much a goal-oriented process we're heading on here. We are in a very complex region. So the next steps are obviously to talk about the high-level buy-in, who the key stakeholders, etc. are. This is not meant to be geographically bound. It's meant to be about the lives of the people who live in this locality, and we have representatives here from Walsall, Dudley, Sandwell, Telford and Stafford as well. So we've got a really big geographic footprint, and we have to challenge ourselves on that. At the moment, we're pulling together evidence bases. We said at the launch we would host 3 specific events to unpick the 3 challenges we have identified for ourselves. We will schedule those. We now have Natalie as a coordinator, Natalie Lewis, who's been running around with microphones and who has organised all this morning. She will be in touch about those events. Feel free to, we thought 3 separate events, and then we could target specific population groups and different attendees, but if you'd like to attend all, that would be fabulous as well. From today, we will share slides as long as GDPR lets us take these slides with people's photos on them and share them with you. So we'll send the slides out. We will circulate the attendee list as well, if you wouldn't mind, our central kind of list. We'll probably do it today so we don't break GDPR, but we need to know if we're missing anybody, who should be on the list that we're missing. And I was already criticised yesterday for not inviting someone I should have done. So this is supposed to be an inclusive process, so we need to make sure our circulation list is spot on. Reports, we have commissioned, Professor Sir Alan has committed some resource to the production of a informal and non-formal piece of research around what's going on in Wolverhampton, and I know the participants of that would like that report back. We're partnering with the new Institute of Community Research and Development, and Laura is in the room. That was launched yesterday, and she is supporting that, as well as the Institute of Education that Alan belongs to, and that document is being produced as a proper report to be circulated, and we will also circulate the report that the previous coordinator, James Keatley, wrote when he returned back from the conference at Cork. So we do have his notes. So high-level buy-in, your buy-in please, your commitment to taking this to the next step to now create the conversations about what we want, and to assist us in how we're going to manage this. We see ourselves just as the conduit to get the conversation going. My teams in the 2 centres in Stafford and Telford are working on festivals of learning. We have graduate interns and graduate teaching assistants from the university creating all sorts of programs happening in what was Adult Learners Week, in the week of the Festival of Learning. So we, despite austerity, are going to keep going and work in partnership to start to sow the seeds of these activities. And we have great partners in the room doing that. So thank you very much for coming. We will upload the film of this onto the website, and we will also circulate it to those who are not here. If I've missed anything, please let me know afterwards, and feel free to stay. We also are having a round table about the next steps, the operational steps, with some of the key partners. And the thing I've forgotten to say is that Wolverhampton City Council, since the launch, have made a commitment to embed this concept in what will be, I think, the Education, Employment and Skills, and we have representatives from the council here, so we're looking to other partners to do similar things to share this across the region. So thank you for your wonderful presentations. These are wicked problems which require complex and multifaceted and partnership solutions, as you've heard, and you give us inspiration that we can do it. So thank you for taking the time and coming to share. Excellent, thank you.